Welcome to Uptown Doula, a podcast that keeps busy parents like you from freaking the fuck out. I'm your host, Haley Jasmine. On today's podcast, we are talking with Carolyn, Honea, owner and international board-certified lactation consultant with Lake Norman Breastfeeding Solutions, along with Athena, Catacalos, birth doula and certified lactation consultant. Two women who know just about everything regarding boob, lactation, latch, weaning, and everything in between. These wonderful women are sharing with us the necessary steps to make sure your breastfeeding journey is a success. We are so excited to have them join us on our first podcast and hope you enjoy the conversation. Hello and welcome to the Uptown Doula podcast. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Congratulations, you are our first guest.
Awesome. That's a privilege.
And before we started this podcast, I actually reached out to you first. So I could not be happier with having both of you on here. And I say both of you because we have two people on our podcast. Why don't you give a few minutes just to introduce yourself, you know, who you are, your business, what this episode is all about, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Carolyn, Honea. I'm the owner and lead IBCLC at Lake Norman Breastfeeding Solutions. I started working in the field of breastfeeding in 2011. And since then have kind of gradually grown my practice. I do home visits mostly. So we will travel to women's homes and help them with breastfeeding. Anything from birth through weaning we'll support along the way. And about a year or two ago, my practice grew to the point that I felt like I needed additional help. And so I reached out to Athena, and I'll let her take it from there.
Hi, I'm Athena Catacalos. And I am a birth doula, new to the world, and about a year ago I joined Carolyn. I have a huge passion for helping parents and for working with children. I've been in childcare for about 8 years, and I understand how important it is to start off correct and create that nice bond between the parents and the children that lasts a lifetime.
Absolutely. So breastfeeding is very important to me. I'm a doula as well. So that's how we know each other, is from doula work, although we've never worked together personally. Yes. That's how I got started. And the way I got started was just having babies. And breastfeeding was important to me. I have 3 kids, and, you know, I thought it would be easy. No one told me the issues you run into with breastfeeding. I don't think I ever took a class my first time around. I took a childbirth education class, but that was about it. So when I had my baby and I started breastfeeding, we ran into a lot of roadblocks. Yep. And I saw a lot of IBCLCs. I think I met with 6 people total. Wow. And the first time around, we ended up exclusively pumping. So I have experience with, you know, trying to get my baby latched on, then exclusively pumping, thinking that would actually be easier. I was like, okay, my boobs don't come with measuring cups. Don't we wish we did? And I was like, pumping is going to be easier because then my baby's going to know exactly how much she's getting.
We hear that a lot, especially with the first baby. I find it's more common for women to exclusively pump compared to the second baby. And I think when they have their second baby, it kind of hits them all the work that they really did with that first baby pumping exclusively. So sometimes we'll get those mamas then reaching out to us to help them with number 2 because they don't want to exclusively pump the second one. They realize that's going to be a big juggling act. And so we try to help them be successful with getting that baby latched and finding easy ways to juggle 2 kids.
That's awesome. And you do home visits, right?
We do.
Okay.
Most of our home visits are anywhere from North Charlotte up through Statesville. Although I think that it seems like the most babies are in the Huntersville area right now. Lots
of babies in Huntersville.
Yes,
and Huntersville's growing, so you're going to be seeing a lot more, I'd say, in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Huntersville is getting huge. Denver's growing too. So do you work out in Denver as well?
We do, yeah.
Very nice, very nice. All right, so this episode is going to be about 3 ways or 3 steps to successful breastfeeding. Where do women begin? Because a lot of the clients who come to me, a lot of the women who come to me and hire me as birth doulas, one of the important things that they want is they want to breastfeed their babies. They're like, I want to breastfeed. I'm open if things happen, but I really want that to start off at a good start. Absolutely. So if you're sitting in front of a pregnant woman right now, what advice would you give her in a short amount of time?
Yeah. We tend to focus on 3 steps that we say under most circumstances will lead to breastfeeding success. And of course, a lot can happen outside of these things. But generally speaking, the 3 things that we see lead to breastfeeding success are, first, to focus on frequent and responsive breastfeeding. And what we mean by that is we want your baby breastfeeding at least 8 to 12 times per 24 hours. And that is really the number one key, I would say, to breastfeeding success. If you just picked one thing, that would be the starting point, is that frequency of feeding. But newborns are really sleepy sometimes. And so because of that, it needs to be a bit of a two-way relationship. So you want to start a breastfeed anytime baby shows feeding cues, and cues are their language. It's how they show you that they're hungry, they need to nurse. So things like rooting, sucking on their hands, getting fidgety. At the first sign of those cues, we want to put baby to the breast. But on the flip side, if baby's being a sleepyhead and doesn't seem like they're on their way to getting at least 8 to 12 feeds per 24 hours, then we want parents to initiate those feeds. So it's both. Baby can initiate a feed, or the parent can initiate a feed. So we want to watch the baby for those cues, but also kind of loosely keep an eye on the time, because if babies sleep too much, then they are not going to stimulate mom's milk supply, and the baby's not going to get enough milk. And that's when things really start to go downhill quickly, and mom's milk won't come in well, and baby will lose too much weight. So that frequency of feeding is probably the most important step.
And it seems like when you bring a baby home, that's all the baby's doing.
Yeah, is sleeping,
and eating,
and that's it.
Pooping,
Yep.
And that's it. But that's what you want to see.
Yeah.
And the amount of time a baby, and I'm a sleep coach as well, and that's how I met you, Carolyn. But it surprised me how much newborns sleep.
Yeah,
it really shocked me. My sister-in-law told me it's going to be like 18 to 20 something hours.
Yeah.
Like, babies sleep a lot, and I'm like,
they do.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they basically are waking up to feed.
Yeah.
And how much time? So if a baby wakes up at like 7 a.m. and you feed the baby at 7 a.m., they basically go right back to sleep. And how long can they stay awake in between feeds? What do you think?
Typically, a brand new newborn is maybe going to have 1 or 2 kind of longer awake stretches each day. But what we recommend, if you're trying to get babies' days and nights flipped, since most newborns are going to be wanting to nurse a lot at night and then sleep even more in the day, the way that we recommend going about that is to initiate more daytime feeds. So what we tell parents a lot of times, when you sit down to breastfeed, glance at the clock, and then about 2 hours later, just make sure that baby's not too cozy. So maybe unswaddle baby, lay her on her back on a flat hard surface, and what that does is that lets the baby get into a light sleep. Because in a light sleep, babies are more likely to notice they're hungry and wake up. Whereas if they're in a deep sleep, like they're swaddled and they're super cozy, they are just going to sleep. They might sleep 4 hours in the day. That's skipping a feed. And guess when they want to make up that feed later?
Gotcha.
At night, in the middle of the night. So lots of daytime feeding will actually get you to better nighttime sleep.
So loading them up in the day so they sleep more at night. And
Absolutely.
I've followed that as a sleep coach. Like, if you want your baby sleeping through the night, you know, feed as much as you can during the day. So you're not up all night. But how do you, because the hardest thing personally that I've gone through, and having babies myself, is watching the clock. Because you have the baby and the nurses say, we want the baby to feed within the first hour. And you're going to have to feed your baby every 2 hours. So there's apps out there, and there's a lot of confusion on watching the clock versus watching the baby. How can we put moms at ease to do both, but not obsess over the clock?
Yeah,
because that's scary. Like, you don't want to not feed
It
your baby,
is.
right?
Right. Yeah, and it really depends on mom's personality. So depending on the personality, we might encourage just even just a tally mark system in the daytime to keep track of feeds. Make sure you're getting in enough feeds each day. But if your baby is pretty good about giving feeding cues every 2 to 3 hours, then you probably don't even need to keep track or look at the clock at all. If your baby's pretty consistent with showing feeding cues every 2 to 3 hours or so, and you are your first kind of lesson, I think, in some ways, of becoming a mom is just learning to read your baby. And that takes practice, trial and error. You can't nurse too much, thankfully. So if you're ever not sure if your baby is hungry or showing feeding cues, just offer to breastfeed. If they're full, they won't eat. And it gives you a chance, just trial and error. You gotta connect with baby and just start reading their little cues,
right?
Which gets a lot easier with time.
It does. It gets a lot easier. My second baby was a lot easier than the first, and I was. People having second babies who had a harder time the first time around may experience some anxiety going into it the second time. Like, is this going to be the same story? But it is a practice game. But you got to get used to this game, right?
Yes.
No practice makes perfect, and offering the breast is great advice. Now, boobs don't come with measuring cups. Okay, this is another problem that I'm seeing, not only with myself in the beginning, but with families is, okay, I don't know how much my baby is eating at all. And
nerve-wracking.
What'd you say?
It can be nerve-wracking.
Right? It can be so nerve-wracking because there's a trust factor involved. You have to trust yourself and your baby and that you guys are doing the right things. But what are some, I guess, checks that you can do to make sure your baby's getting enough to eat?
Yes, we definitely do see that a lot, especially with first-time mothers. Some of the best ways to figure out whether you're providing enough for your baby and you have a nice milk supply is getting weight checks, weekly weight checks, and plotting that on a growth chart. The World Health Organization has a great growth chart that you can follow along with. Another thing is hearing those active swallows. And when you get a great latch, you should get those active swallows and be hearing that, and they should be vigorously swallowing. If they do slow down, then I do convince moms to stimulate the baby or massage their breasts to keep their milk flowing and finish the feed before the baby goes to soothing and comforting, which is also really nice for bonding, but we try to have that more towards the end of the feed so that we know baby's fed. And then the mom can have that nice bonding time. But the biggest thing is weight checks and feeding frequently. And then cluster feeding happens.
Cluster feeding. Yes. I remember that all too well. I'm with a mom right now and she's experienced cluster feeding, and it sounds like it kind of go into the same, question as before is, when moms are when babies are cluster feeding, it can sometimes have moms feel like they're not producing enough. Like, oh my God, my baby just fed like an hour ago. What's going on? Did they not get enough? Is my milk? And then just widespread panic around the postpartum period. Yes. So cluster feeding, let's talk about that for just a second. What is cluster feeding? When does it begin? How long does it last?
So cluster feeding is when a baby wants to nurse a couple of times in a row instead of it being nice, neat, tidy intervals. Newborns oftentimes are not very consistent, so they might not be every 2 to 3 hours on the dot. And they'll go through periods of the day where they want to nurse maybe hourly is pretty common for cluster feeding. But there are some important differences between normal cluster feeding and cluster feeding that's a sign of a problem. So if a baby is just constantly cluster feeding, meaning they want to nurse hourly, around the clock, day after day kind of thing, that is not normal. Babies should seem satisfied after most feeds. So a good sign in babies breastfeeding is that they look kind of milk drunk afterwards, or they're ready to take a nice nap.
That is sweet to watch.
It is. It's the best feeling.
You lift the arm and it just drops.
Yes, they get limp and loose. Love it. So if baby's acting that way after most feeds, that's a great sign. But if they're cluster feeding day and night and it doesn't feel like it's letting up, or there's not frequent times of the day where the baby seems really satisfied after, then it's a good idea to get a weight check, like Athena mentioned. Weight is kind of our gold standard way to know if baby's getting enough milk. And then also watch the diaper output too. So with a newborn, we can kind of use diapers. Diapers aren't very accurate with older babies, but for a newborn, if they're pooping and peeing a lot, that's a great sign. But definitely if a baby feels like he's not satisfied and he's just constantly cluster feeding, then schedule an appointment with us, meet with a lactation consultant. We can weigh your baby before and after nursing, and that lets us measure how much milk baby drank.
Because what goes in must come out, right?
Exactly, yeah. And we have very sensitive scales, so we can measure drops of milk. And by weighing baby before and after the feed, we know exactly how much they ate, and that can help us guide you as well.
That's awesome.
That really gives confidence to the mothers once they see that.
Oh, I know. I have a son, I don't know if you know, he has Down syndrome, and so breastfeeding was really tricky for us. It took about a month just to get off the nipple shield, and so there was constant weight checks, and I didn't even know about that until I had him. He was my third baby. I went through, because breastfeeding, if it's going really, really smooth, you don't question anything. Sure. But when you start to get a hiccup, it's like, wait a second, what can we do about this? But are there would you recommend mothers buy scales, or do you think that would get into their head too much? Because they have a scale and maybe make them worry a little bit? Because I know that they have changing tables that are actually scales that have, of course, an app. Right. Which is really cool. What do you recommend? Do they need that, or do they not need that?
So there's a couple things to think about with that. It does kind of produce a little bit more anxiety when you're looking at that very often, because feeds do ebb and flow throughout the day. During the AM hours, usually the mom produces a little bit more milk, so that changes throughout the day. Also, some of the scales aren't really as accurate as you would like. So if you go from either the lactation scale or your pediatrician scale and then go to your home scale, it might not be very accurate like that.
Yeah, but when you have diapers on versus not having diapers on,
exactly.
We cloth diapers, so that those things are heavy.
Yes, or even feeding right before the weight can change it a couple ounces, and that makes a big difference. So we recommend, if you do have a scale at home, maybe once a week weight, or if you don't, then don't worry about getting one and just take them to the doctor if you think they need a weight check, or make a lactation consult.
Lactation consult. I just like that you don't have to put on pants. Like, you guys can just come over. You always got time for that.
Right.
I was in Central Illinois when I had babies, and I don't think we had lactation consultants that came to your home. So now I'm like, oh, I want to have another baby so I can have help on my couch.
Right? Yes. We tell moms our favorite uniform for you to wear when we come visit you with a new baby. It's just yoga pants and a bathrobe. You don't even have to have on a bra. It's so comfy. It's easy access for the baby. You don't need to do your dishes. We kind of expect to walk into a really messy home, and that's okay. Yes. There's no judgment. It tells us that you're resting and bonding with baby, which is exactly what we want.
Exactly. Yeah. And piece of advice that I give moms before they go in to have their babies is buy a small postpartum wardrobe. Yeah. Because when you have a baby, you don't necessarily want to go back to your pregnancy clothes, but you're also probably not ready for your pre-pregnancy clothes, because your pre-pregnancy clothes are probably not yoga pants. They might be dress pants for work. They might be blue jeans. Like, who wants to wear that? And I think that's the biggest thing that helped me. So just having that, transition wardrobe, t-shirts, V-necks, yes, or no shirt at all.
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing. So we talked about number 1, which is frequent breastfeeding. Yep. What's number 2?
Number 2 is practicing a deep, comfortable latch.
So not nipple feeding.
Right, not nipple feeding. We want the baby really latched to the breast, having a big mouthful of breast tissue in their mouth. The reason for that is twofold. First of all, that good latch is what keeps it from hurting mom. Breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. Now, it's common for it to hurt in the beginning, but it's not supposed to hurt. And so normal kind of soreness would be peaking around like day 3 postpartum. So that's when moms will often have the most kind of sensation of maybe their nipples feel sore or irritated. And then as soon as your milk comes in, it should be getting better. And so really by the end of the first week postpartum, breastfeeding should be pain-free. But if you at any point have toe curling pain, that means there's a latch problem. Toe curling pain is never normal, and we really want to get on top of that quickly before the nipples start to become cracked, painful, bleeding.
How do you fix that? Let's say that you have blood that seeps into the breast pump. I've seen pink milk before.
Yes, it happens.
So what do you do? Is it normal? Like, if a couple drops of blood get into the breast milk, into the pump, can baby still drink it, or does a mom have to dump that?
Yes, baby can still drink it. So as long as you are not HIV positive, then baby absolutely can still drink the milk with a little bit of blood in it. Okay. It sounds a little weird to think, but breast milk is actually made from your blood supply. And typically when women are directly breastfeeding...
Makes sense.
Yeah, you wouldn't even know if your baby got a couple drops of milk in there. And really all it takes is a few little drops of blood in the pumped bottle to make it look really pink. So generally speaking, it's not a problem. But we want to get those nipples healed. So Athena, tell us maybe a little bit about how to know if you have a good latch.
Yes. So when you have a good latch, you want the baby to be really latched onto your breast and have a good amount of your areola in there too. Like Haley said, you don't want them to be nipple feeding, which also applies to bottles, which we can get into a little bit later. So when you're done breastfeeding, and when the baby pops off, you want your nipple to be nice and round. You don't want there to be a ridge or compression of any sort. I know some moms say that their nipple looks closer to a new lipstick.
That's a really good description. I've never heard of that. And I can never keep my lipstick in that.
Right.
I tried. I'm like, I have friends, and I think there's a personality test out there. We're totally going off topic here. There's a personality test out there on what your lipstick shape is.
I believe this.
And I see the shapes, and like, mine's like kind of round, or it's totally flat. Like, what does that say about me?
Well, we don't want the nipples to look like the lipstick.
Yes. We want it to be nice and round, like the wore out lipstick.
The wore out lipstick, yes, because that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Yes. Got to get used to it. And there's nothing you can do, right, to get your nipples ready. Because back in the day, I think Grandma is suggesting getting some clothespins.
Oh, gosh.
What do you say if a woman comes to you and said, look, I've got some clothespins. I've been roughing up my nipples this whole pregnancy. What do you say to her?
That is definitely one of the myths that we can bust, is that your nipples don't get tougher and callous. And that's not what makes it comfortable. It's comfortable because your nipples should be far enough in the baby's mouth up towards the higher part of the palate, which is kind of a comfort zone. So you want it to be deep enough in the mouth, and the baby should be able to move its tongue in a way that it is comfortable for you.
And there's videos out there that actually show if you could look inside a mother's mouth and see the nipple. So that can explain a lot of what you're saying, because it's hard because people are listening to us.
Right.
They can't, even we're making motions with our hands.
Yes.
And no one can see it. But, not seeing the areola, basically.
Yep, the bottom of the areola should be in their mouth. And we have videos on our website.
Yes. If
people want to Google Lake Norman Breastfeeding Solutions, pull up our website. We have some really good videos of latch techniques there that people can check out as well.
Yes. That's amazing. Okay. Pacifiers. Now that we're on the topic of nipples and lipstick and clothespins, let's talk about pacifiers. When do you suggest introducing those? Because I feel there's a little controversy behind pumping and passies. Like, what's the nitty-gritty on pacifiers?
So, especially in the first month, I usually recommend that parents hold off until they really feel comfortable latching. And even if you're pumping at that point, a lot of women still want to get back to breastfeeding at some point or want to have that as an option. So while they're still getting used to that, I would hold off on pacifiers unless they're very needed, like a car ride or just a couple minutes here and there. Another option for that would also be a parent's clean finger, because it is much bulkier and doesn't flatten in their mouth, so the baby's mouth stays open while they're sucking.
Yes, finger sucking on mom or dad's finger actually promotes a better suck. And it's a great way for dads to bond. So sometimes in consults, we'll actually encourage dad to let baby suck on his finger. We just kind of use the pointer finger rested up on the roof of their mouth. And baby's got a much better latch, you could say, to the finger than a pacifier, because pacifier nipples are so tiny. They haven't started making breast-like pacifiers yet, the way that they're doing with bottles.
It's 2020.
I know, like, come on already. We need a big boob pacifier.
We can pump in the car on the way to work, but we can't find a pacifier.
With a latch. So, like Athena was saying, if your baby's still kind of getting the hang of breastfeeding and latching, it might be better to avoid the pacifiers. There can be a time and a place for them later, though.
Yes, especially if you are going through reflux with your baby. That can be really helpful for soothing after feeds. But another thing to pay attention for with pacifier, especially while the baby is so young, is missing those early feeding cues. So by the time you realize that your baby's hungry, they have spit out the pacifier and they are in their last feeding cues, crying, and sometimes even need to be calmed before you can feed them.
Never good.
Because they've skipped all of their first feeding cues. And so if the baby doesn't have that, usually you can see they're fidgeting or sticking their lip out, smacking their lip, or sticking their tongue out and smacking their lips, and you can catch those ready to feed. And usually when you catch the earlier cues, it's easier to latch as well because the baby's more patient.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That is great advice. Now, pumping, do you feel the same way about pumping? As far as like when you begin to do that and introduce the pump?
I like to customize the pump advice for each mom. So we tell moms that you can start pumping whenever you feel up for it. For some moms, that might be day 3. For other moms, that might not be until, a week or 2 before they go back to work. So we really feel like moms can start whenever they want to, but where we do recommend kind of a guideline is to probably avoid pumping more than about 3 ounces a day for their freezer stash. Right now, there's a lot of social media pressure for moms to have this massive freezer stash of breast milk. And it's great if you're donating milk. But there can be some unpleasant symptoms that come with a massive oversupply like that, like engorgement, more plaque ducts. Your baby sounds like they're kind of drowning in your milk flow.
I feel like you're talking about me right now. I'm an oversupplier, for sure.
Yeah.
All this sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
The big lumps in the side of your boob.
It's not fun.
It's not fun. It's not even a good problem to have.
It's not really.
Yeah. It's not, because I told people, I was like, I have oversupply.
It's unpleasant.
Like, this is great. I'm like, no, it's not.
No. So because of that, we don't want women pumping too much or too often because it will create that oversupply. So a good rule of thumb is try not to pump more than about 3 ounces a day beyond what your baby needs that day, and that will help prevent oversupply. So you can really kind of start whenever you want to, as long as you don't go crazy with it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And seeing these huge freezer stashes online and women sharing their enormous pump output, I do see that does add a little bit of anxiety to women when they pump after feeding and they can only get a few drops to maybe an ounce or so. But pumping after feeding, an ounce is actually very average and very good.
Yeah.
And not feeling like crap, because when you see those stashes, it was the same when, I started out in baby wearing and had a baby wearing shop, and people would show off their baby carrier stash.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, there's some people like, I've got one. I was like, great.
Yeah.
That one is amazing, and it's getting you through. You can't wear all of them at once.
Right, and they're a little bit expensive, too.
Yeah. So, okay, well, cool. Well, let's move on to number 3. What's number 3? What?
Number 3 is to really prioritize and focus on nurturing your baby close to you. We put just this focus on nurturing in our 3 steps to success because we find you can filter out a lot of really bad advice just by asking yourself, does this sound nurturing? There's so much baby advice out there. Some of it came from some earlier generations that had a lot of ideas about not spoiling your baby, that kind of a thing. But now we know that really building that close bond with your baby, building your kind of connection, your love, that trust that comes through responding to your baby in the early months is really important and actually helps you be successful breastfeeding.
Yeah. I mean, spending time with your baby where it doesn't feel like you can actually enjoy your baby.
Yeah.
So I like number 3. Number 3 is probably my favorite because
it's the easiest one.
It's the easiest one, and dads and partners can get in on this.
Absolutely.
Because skin to skin is amazing, even if it's just part of an arm or a chest, just having some of that contact and being able to just sit back and really enjoy your baby without it feeling like a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it can feel like a job.
Work. Yeah, taking
a lot of
care
work.
of the baby is a lot of work. When you get that skin-to-skin contact, and that means, where baby's probably undressed, just wearing a diaper, and against mom or dad's bare chest, what that does with that skin-to-skin connection is it boosts the love hormones.
Oh, yeah, the oxytocin.
Yeah, get that oxytocin high.
Love that oxytocin.
Yeah, it helps moms and dads bond, but it has one extra perk for moms when they're skin-to-skin with baby. That oxytocin actually boosts mom's milk supply as well. And so if you have low milk supply, spending a couple days in bed with baby, skin to skin, nursing often can really promote your milk supply, get you some higher milk production.
Yes, and wouldn't we all just love that?
Yes,
especially if you're struggling a little bit in the beginning.
Who could turn down a couple hours in bed with baby snuggling?
And even baby wearing. So I found, when I was having babies and I had a baby wearing shop and taught parents how to wear their babies, we also taught them how to nurse in the carrier.
That's awesome.
And so when you're done, you've got this exposed baby head basically in your face.
Yeah.
And taking a few hits off the baby's head could also kind of get that.
Smelling them. They're beautiful.
They're
baby
so delicious.
Smell. They are. I miss that part.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's why I do the work I do. Help
Yes.
parents, but also snuggling in them babies.
Yes, absolutely. I love babies.
I
love baby wearing with my own. I have 4 kids, and so I really don't know how I would have survived those early years without baby wearing. So really from as soon as I was on my feet, like when I was enough postpartum that I was walking around the house very much, that's when I started baby wearing with mine. And it just made all the difference because I could still watch for feeding cues. I had that connection with them. Sometimes I'd even wear them skin to skin in the carrier at home.
Yeah, you can't tell.
I'd be topless.
That's what the wraps are great for that.
Absolutely.
And,
put on a little cardigan if you want to on the outside. And it was wonderful. That way awesome. I could tend to all the other things I needed to do, but still have baby close to me.
You can cook. You can do everything.
Yeah,
You've got
really
2
can.
hands.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. Well, man, these were great. These are great tips, and I appreciate it so much. I want to get into one small segment.
Sure.
If you're ready for it. Let's bust some myths.
Okay.
Let's bust some myths. There's lots of myths out there with breastfeeding and just about everything else that comes with parenting.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about them. So, alcohol and breastfeeding. That's one I see a lot.
Yes.
Can you drink while you're breastfeeding? Obviously, when you're pregnant, probably not the best idea, but you're not pregnant.
Yeah.
You have a baby. I think you deserve one.
I agree. I totally agree. Bring the champagne to the delivery room.
Absolutely. Especially we had New Year's babies. And I've been seeing pictures on social media with the party hats and the champagne. So can you drink, and does it help milk supply? Because that's also something I've heard.
Out there, right? So you can drink in moderation when you're breastfeeding. The way that it works is that the level of alcohol in your milk is going to match the level of alcohol in your blood. So when we think about like an alcoholic beverage, they might have maybe 12%, something like that, volume of alcohol, but your bloodstream is going to be like, 100% of that. And the same for your milk. So actually, some studies have found that after mom has 1 or 2 drinks, that the level of alcohol in her milk is the same level of naturally occurring alcohol in orange juice. Because orange juice actually has natural alcohol in it.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it does. It's a very tiny amount. And that's same as your breast milk after you've had 1 or 2 drinks. So we really don't worry about it. I think a good rule of thumb is that if you're safe to drive a car, you're safe to breastfeed. We don't really want intoxicated moms holding their babies anyway.
Especially if they're co-sleeping.
Right. Definitely don't co-sleep.
Yeah, because especially with co-sleeping situations, that would be kind of tricky if you're intoxicated.
Yes, definitely don't
want to roll over babies.
Don't co-sleep when you're intoxicated. Don't breastfeed when you're intoxicated. But if you just have 1 or 2 drinks, no worries. You don't have to time it. You can continue on with nursing and caring for baby like usual.
Awesome. Now, another myth I've heard is you're going to be strapped at home, married to your pump, and married to breastfeeding and won't be able to get out. What do you think about that? Are you stuck?
Definitely not.
When you're breastfeeding?
Again, with 4 kiddos, and I nursed all of mine for a couple of years, we went everywhere. I did not want to be stuck home or in a back room for 8 years breastfeeding. And so we went everywhere, and you really can, honestly, once you get past the first month or 2, breastfeeding is actually probably the easiest way to be out and about with a baby because you don't have to plan ahead. You don't have to know how long you're going to be gone and pack that many bottles and have the formula and the water, or even like have pumped breast milk that you're trying to keep the right temperature. So when you're breastfeeding and you're on the go, you can really you can wing it. You can just go when you want to go and stay out as long as you want to be out and nurse wherever you are. We have laws in all 50 states now, finally, that say,
about time, right?
Really, that say you are allowed to breastfeed wherever you are. And businesses are not allowed to tell you to cover up or to leave. So you have the human right to breastfeed wherever you want.
And about that, because public breastfeeding, there's so many, I feel like they're fake social media videos about breastfeeding in public. There was one video that came out, and they followed this woman around, and she was breastfeeding it was a doll. It wasn't even a real baby, but she was getting reactions everywhere she went. In just a 2-hour, they said that they were out for 2 hours. She was approached 6 times.
I find that hard to believe.
I was like, I've been breastfeeding for, I think 6 years total. No one has ever approached me.
Me either. Nobody ever gave me a hard time. And I'm telling you, I breastfed everywhere.
It's safe.
Yeah.
It's safe to go out.
It is.
It's safe. You can go out, you can breastfeed.
Yeah, enjoy your life. And
no
honestly,
one can do it,
postpartum depression is more common when women feel isolated. And so the last thing that's going to help a new mom feel, happy and healthy is going to be hiding away somewhere on her own. So we really want mamas to connect with other mamas, do what they enjoy, get out there, enjoy life, and don't let the way you feed stop you.
Yeah, absolutely not. Let's do one more myth. Medications. Medications and food. We'll combine those two together. What are your thoughts on medication and food? Do women have to completely change their entire diet because they're breastfeeding? And when they get sick, can they take anything?
Right. So you can eat whatever you would normally enjoy eating. You don't have to follow a special diet plan. Now, eating healthy is going to help you feel better because when you're breastfeeding, your body prioritizes your milk. So it puts all the best nutrients into your milk. So your baby's probably getting amazing quality milk no matter how you eat. You're the one that will feel depleted if you don't eat healthy. So we recommend eating healthy for your sake, but eat the foods you like to eat. The only time we recommend diet changes is sometimes when baby is colicky or has severe reflux. We might make some adjustments to diet in a kind of customized one-on-one sort of context. And then as far as medications go, so just like with the alcohol, very little medication gets into your breast milk. So it's extremely rare that we would worry about a medication because of its safety for baby. Usually the only medications we worry about from that vantage point would be like narcotics and other really hard drugs. There are more medicines though that we sometimes would have concerns about for milk supply. So cold medication is one that comes up a lot this time of year. You think about the way most cold medicines work, they kind of dry up your mucous membranes and that mucus production.
Dry up doesn't sound like a word that pairs well with breastfeeding.
It does not. Unfortunately, they can also have an effect of drying up milk production. So we do have to be careful with cold medications, not because they would be dangerous for baby. They're safe for you to take as far as baby's concerned, but just because they can affect your milk production. So there are other remedies, and especially just supporting your immune system is probably the most important thing to do when you're sick.
Taking care of yourself. Because we forget to do that sometimes.
Definitely.
I think a lot of moms will forget to. They care so much for this human being that they brought into the world. They kind of forget about themselves, and we can't forget about ourselves. We got to take care of ourselves because it's how we become better mothers.
It is. You can't take care of baby well when you're run down.
Nope. Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for being on with us. This is amazing, very insightful. And do you have any events or anything coming up that you want to share?
Well, we are working on expanding our YouTube channel.
And I love your YouTube channel, by the way. Your videos are amazing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Especially the holiday one that you just posted recently.
Well, if folks want to find our YouTube videos, they can go to our website. A lot of them are embedded in our website, or they can search YouTube for my name, Carolyn Honea, IBCLC, and you should be able to find our YouTube channel that way.
And what is your website again? And where are you located?
The website is www.LKN, that's the initials for Lake Norman, breastfeedingsolutions.com. And our office is based in Davidson, North Carolina, but we do home visits for North Charlotte and kind of onwards north from there.
Awesome. And you do breastfeeding classes, because I took your baby-led weaning class, which blew me away. And I tell you what, if you can get on our website, find these classes, you will not be disappointed at all. So where do you offer your classes, and how often do you do these classes?
We usually offer them about quarterly.
Okay.
Anyone can host one of our classes, though. So if you have a group of friends and you guys want to get together and have a class, maybe if you're either pregnant around the same time or your baby's a similar age,
That'll be fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. I love those classes.
I didn't know you did that.
A group of moms. Those are my favorite.
That's awesome.
Yep. So, and we do classes for prenatal when you're pregnant, but we also do classes like Haley mentioned for older babies where we talk about introducing solid foods and weaning and what that all looks like.
That's amazing. Well, thank you again for being on. You are just a delight. And
Our pleasure.
I could talk to you pretty much all day.
Well, we would love to do this again sometime.
Yes,
we'll cover
anytime.
More topics.
We got so many. I was just been thinking about so many cool topics that we could go over. So
there are. There's a lot out there.
Oh, cool. Well, gosh, this was great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Alrighty. Thank you so much for listening, and please don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. Seriously, it would make my day. For more information on Uptown Doula, please visit our website at www.uptowndoula.com. See you soon. How was it?
Good.
Did you have fun?
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. I thought that went really, really well.
Yeah, it's an easy topic to converse on.
Yes,
I feel like
absolutely.
there's so much there. So,
All right, well, thanks again.
Yeah, you're welcome.